IISD Reporting Services is in Paris for the UN climate change talks, covering selected side events. On Tuesday, 8th December, delegates considered on-the-ground experiences and analytical work on strategies to simultaneously meet growth and climate goals, focusing on land use and infrastructure investments in an event organized by Climate Policy Initiative and Brookings Institution. The event looked at how nations' growth and climate goals are interlinked. Nick Stern presented a big picture perspective.
The two defining challenges of this century are managing climate change and overcoming poverty. These next 20 years are absolutely vital for managing climate change and determining what sort of development is possible. We know we're right on the edge of the concentrations now that make it possible to hold to 2 degrees. It is possible, and indeed it's possible to do better, but only if we act quickly. Delay is very dangerous.
Infrastructure, technology, finance, policy, and land use emerged as major themes for meeting growth, development, and climate goals.
Infrastructure is a critical element and indeed a connector between the Sustainable Development Goals. It is a key to the foundation of inclusive growth and poverty reduction. It's also key for the effective delivery of social services that are embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals.
A huge priority is electricity and energy availability.
If someone had said that at the microeconomic level, the spreads, the difference in cost between renewable energy and fossil fuel energy would be as small as they are today, we would have all been overjoyed. Those costs have come down enormously as you start to see more penetration of these cheaper technologies that we are all celebrating and should be celebrating. It will raise questions about whether we have the right design of our energy systems, because they have historically been designed around efficient use of variable cost.
The event looked at how nations' growth and climate goals are interlinked.
And the headline is that finance should enable infrastructure, but for emerging and developing countries right now, it's an impediment. It's an amplifier of costs. Because of the difficulties of accessing finance and because the costs of financing are so high, particularly for capital-intensive investments like renewables, finance has become an impediment for the developing world.
The event also tackled land use. Jane Wilkinson provided the background.
Agricultural systems are one of the biggest drivers of economic development, particularly in some of the large tropical developing countries like Indonesia and Brazil. And of course, they're also a driver of deforestation. So growth and emissions are coming from the same set of land use changes. As well, there's a lot of rural poverty that's associated with living outside of cities. And so we can see that actually greening up the way that agriculture production takes place is going to be a really big part of climate change.
Isabella Teixeira and Carlos KLINK provided the Brazilian context.
Brazil is a huge country. So when I discuss agriculture in the south of the country, it's completely different, the focus that we need if we have in the center of the country or in the northeast of the country. And for this, we need to mobilize different stakeholders. And for this, we need a diversity of economic language to mobilize the guys. And for this, it's also strategic that we have national economic and social development bank on board.
But little by little, building up on the policy and the instrument that you have to deploy, to put the policy in place, the Brazilian society started to realize that we are not talking only, when we mention climate change, we are not only talking about reducing emissions. Of course, that's important. But we're talking about the new future, the new pathway of development for Brazil.
Larry KRAMER discussed the role of philanthropy in meeting growth and climate goals.
The resources that foundations have are minuscule compared to the amount that actually needs to be invested, whether that's by governments or development banks or private equity funds or private investors. But in terms of providing technical assistance, helping develop projects, helping develop the deals themselves, creating pipelines, all that, I think philanthropy has a really important role to play.
Barbara BUCHNER reflected on key messages from the event.
The next 20 years particularly are key in order to getting us on such a low carbon pathway. So what we need is strong acceleration of climate action on the ground around the world. And this strong acceleration requires that we understand really the levers on the finance level, the levers on the policy level, and the levers of the technology level.